There are several types of really bad anime out there. There are the boring, dull shows that I just don't care about, or also the trashy shows which some people find fun, but not me, and again, I don't care about them. Most of these shows I don't have much to say about. They don't leave enough of an impression or give me a reason to want to make a full video about them. I'd rather talk about something that I do like. Shows like King's Game though, they really are something special when it comes to how bad they are, and that is the show I want to talk to you about today. Be warned, I may spoil anything and everything from the show because if I'm going to make a review bashing it, I don't want to leave anything unsaid. So let's get into this truly terrible anime. King's Game is about a class of students who are forced to play the King's Game. The king sends orders to the class via text message, and if the class doesn't obey the orders, then whoever disobeys the orders will be punished, typically via death. Well, at first the class didn't believe that this is real. They soon see how serious it is when their classmates start dying. There's also the fact that this is the second King's Game the main character, Nobuaki, has played, with him being the only one to survive the first. So let's go over the good parts of the show first. The concept is interesting, and it could make for an interesting tale of survival as a class tries to survive while stopping the game. The horror elements were also quite disturbing, which, as this is a horror, that's a good thing. I also liked Nobuaki as a main character as he was likable enough and he was trying to save everyone. And Natsuko was also decent as a villain with how hateable she was, and I did like some of the mental games between her and the other characters, especially a haircut guy, who I think is the best character in the show. Plus, the opening is pretty good. The song was enjoyable, if a bit cliche, and the opening did have some nice foreshadowing put into it. And that was it. Now time for the bad. The music was super forgettable outside the OP and ending. Actually, you know what? Let's take a closer look at the OP, because, well, at first glance, it might seem to be okay or even good. Really, it wasn't. It was just the best part of this terrible show. So it is time for me to do my best Mother's Basement impression and break apart this OP. The opening starts off with some red lightning over a green circle, which I would assume is showing the King's Game virus, especially how it then shows a message from the king. But while this image makes sense with my speculation, we had never seen the virus portrayed with these symbols in the show, which makes it feel disjoint and there for no reason. We then get some pictures of the class with blotches on the screen, which I think is supposed to be blood showing their impending death that will overcome their ordinary life. The lyrics then start, but it feels like it doesn't fit the show. The lyrics start talking about how the speaker is different, how the others don't feel the same way that they do, making it all sound like this would be the story of an outcast fighting against society. But that's not the case at all. The song then goes on about the pressure and failing with the message that it makes us stronger, but that also doesn't fit the show since everyone dies, and the end of the show indicated that this would be the end of the world. The song also says that the best of us rise from the fall, but the entire cast dies, they do no rising. So how does that make any sense? The visuals here just show the cast not really doing much other than to tell us that these are the characters in the story. And while you could say that this shows all the people that Nobuaki lost, that also doesn't fit because the challenges he faced didn't lead to any real growth or victory for him. The song then goes into the chorus about this being the end, but him not being alone, which actually does kind of make sense. At first, it seems to be saying that while this may be the end because he's not alone, they can get through it, but it could instead be interpreted as saying that this is the end for all of them, not just a single one, and they are not alone in this being the end. Which actually fits considering they all die. And then the song just repeats that line with some images that sometimes fit. So basically we got 30 seconds of non-repeating lyrics in the minute-and-a-half song. And while not part of the show itself, the full song is just as repetitive, if not more so. With the second verse not that special, and the bridge just being the words "feed the fire," which again I don't see how that fits, but that's part of the song, not part of the anime, so that's okay, I guess, or whatever. And yeah, again, opening, best part of the series. The visuals as a whole are subpar, with limited backgrounds, no animation that stands out, and overall just looking bland and from 10 years ago. The thing that stood out to me most about the visuals was how over the top the deaths were, so much so that parts of it had to be censored, which to me just speaks of poor planning. If you're going to show something cool, actually show it and know what you can show so you don't have to just take us completely out of the scene. And let's also talk about the blood and gore because there's a lot of it. Now, I'm typically not bothered by blood and gore and all that, though there are times where it gets to me. And King's Game is a case where it does bother me. Sometimes the gore can be used to really convey the disturbing situations the characters are in. Think something like Higurashi or Made in Abyss. It was there to show the danger and pain the characters were going through, and while what was being shown on screen was disturbing, the scenes used it to make us connect to these characters, to feel the pain they were going through. The gore was also limited in these shows, only one scene like that in Made in Abyss, and only once an arc or so in Higurashi. While King's Game, we get tons of gore every episode, and because the show failed to make us connect to the characters and story, it was just gore for the sake of gore, which just felt edgy. It was the same with many of the orders, involving extreme violence or sex, which just felt like the show has thrown all this in to try to seem more mature. But the maturity of a show is driven by the nuances in the story and the message that the show is trying to convey, which there was no nuance or message here. There was no deeper meaning or substance to the story beyond just a bunch of characters dying horrible deaths that really did not do anything to advance the story or the characters. An example of this is how the white-haired girl in the flashback was sexually abused when she was younger, which tried to make her a broken and interesting sort of antagonist, but it came across as just being edgy and trying to make the show feel mature. And speaking of flashbacks, that was half the show. As I mentioned before, our main character Nobuaki had been in 2 King's Games, the present one which is the focus of the show, but also one in the past which is presented to us via flashbacks, which is a really odd way to tell the story because there is no reason for it to be told in a flashback. You could just have the story be 2 different arcs, tell them in chronological order, but instead, by having the first King's Game being told in a flashback, it felt like the story wasn't going anywhere for these episodes because it was focusing on events that already happened. A flashback should provide some information that is needed to understand the current story, like a character's backstory or filling in details to bring us up to speed. It should not be an entire arc, especially since we already know how the story ends, and that's that all the characters will die, so the only important thing for the flashback to do is to explain Nobuaki's past, which really did not need all this details or fruitless suspense. There is also the fact that the vast majority of the characters are pointless and unmemorable. Between the 2 classes, we have over 50 characters, and nearly all of them are forgettable. Now, I get that we won't have all the characters fully fleshed out, but when a show is trying to make us care about them so that the characters dying actually has impact, knowing nothing about them or getting a quick backstory isn't enough. There's also the fact that the characters are all complete idiots. I get that they are in a stressful situation and that they will not think completely logically, but they seem to always go in the opposite direction of common sense and not doing what would be smart to survive, or just getting mad at other characters over stupid stuff. Though the biggest issue I had with the show was the story and how it failed to do anything with the concept that could have been interesting. The story should have been about how the class was trying to figure out the secrets of the game and learn how they could defeat the king to put an end to it. This could have made the characters dying feel more impactful because their deaths actually meant something. And it really should have been a sort of mental struggle between the characters and the king. But the orders of the king had no logic to them to allow this sort of back and forth. For example, an order we see a few times is the king tells the character to lose something important, which is only satisfied when Nobuaki's love ends up drowning. In theory, he destroyed a lot of other things that did matter to him, but this did not count just so they could raise the tension. There was another order that they couldn't do anything unnecessary, which is completely vague, but it apparently meant that they couldn't cry, which is a logical leap that just makes no sense. The worst part though is the King's Game itself, because at the end of the first game, it is revealed to have been caused by a virus. A biological virus at first, which then turned into a computer virus. Think about that for a moment. The whole game was caused by a virus that morphed from biological to computer. These have nothing to do with each other except for the name. There's so many things wrong with this idea, I don't know where to start. Well, first, a biological virus and a computer virus are completely different things. Yes, they do kind of act the same and they do have the same name, but that means nothing. That's why a computer virus was named after the biological one, and there's no fathomable way for it to mutate from one to the other. A biological virus is also an unintelligent life form, if you could even call it alive, but I'm not a biologist. There's no way that it could keep track of all the characters and see if it followed the orders or not, or come up with orders or give them out. In the first King's Game, the orders were delivered by notes, so how could a virus do that? It is revealed that the deaths are caused by a sort of hypnosis, but there is no explanation for how the orders are come up with to begin with. There's also a massive amount of coordination that would be required between all the biological viruses in all the characters in order to deliver the punishments at the right time, and once the virus mutated to a computer virus, how would it hypnotize people into having their bodies die? Unless it was both computer and biological at the same time, but that is not what the show said. Also, a virus spreads as much as it possibly can, so why is it only these classes that are affected by it? Nobuaki was one who carried it from his first class to the second one, but he was around many other people beyond his class, for example his family, or just random other people in town. So why is it that it was only the class drawn into the game? This would require far more intelligence and coordination than a virus would be capable of. It also doesn't make any sense how there was not more police or society involvement once characters started dying. I saw a fan theory that the violence in these deaths wasn't reality but also part of the hypnosis, and while this would make sense, it wasn't in the show. In fact, why didn't the class go ask for help from the adults or government or someone? Especially if the King's game had continued multiple times, surely there would be some sort of reports on it. Maybe they could have gotten help or learned more about the game with the rest of society's help. There's also the fact that the series ended incomplete and without any sort of proper closure. We got a to be continued showing a new person getting a text from the king, but then it just ended there. Plus, the entire class's efforts didn't do anything to stop the king, despite them all dying, which should have been enough to end the game. A tragic end is not a bad way to do a show like this, but it made the entire series feel pointless when they didn't even make progress to give us hope that the king could be defeated next time. So, is that enough reasons why this show is so terrible? Some of the issues seem to have been lost in translation or adaptation from the novel to the anime or from the Japanese to the English dub, but when I'm just judging what I've seen, I really don't care where the issues come from. So I give this show a score of a 1 out of 10 and a rating of kill it with a nuclear bomb. This really is the worst show I've completed, and it's not even bad in a fun way like Big Order, it was just bad in a painful way. So unless you want to suffer, don't watch it. But if you want recommended shows, then well, Big Order is a kind of fun, terrible anime. There's also Higurashi if you want lots of violence and gore, an actual decent plot with it. And there's actually a few similarities between the two, but I won't say more about that. So yeah, that was a fun review. Don't watch the show. Please don't. Or if you do, live stream it so I can laugh at your suffering. That could be fun. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.